All right, the secret weapon. What is the secret weapon, you guys might ask? It's the agent step. The agent step is super, super powerful because essentially it just lets you it performs actions independently to reach a goal. And so that it'll independently, it can use tools, it can to decide what actions to take, and it'll keep working and working and working until it reaches the goal without actually configuring any specific workflow. So it's way more agentic. You want to use this when tasks are unpredictable, there's like a high variance in steps, and you don't want to use this like if something follows the same thing every time or the same pattern every time. You probably want to use like map it out in the flow editor so that your agent follows the same sequential steps every time. You probably don't need the secret weapon for things that are more repetitive and monotonous. And whenever you're configuring an AI agent step, there's three main components you're gonna want to pay attention to. First is skills. Skills are basically the tools your agent can use. And what's awesome in Lindy is we have 5, 10,000 integrations, and all these integrations and like actions can become a tool for your agent with just like the click of a button. And so they could email people, they could scrape the web, they can do all these types of things. And the agent decides like what skills to use and when. So depending on like you give this agent the objective, you give it all these tools, and it's gonna decide when to use tools to reach a certain objective. And like best practice here, you probably want to start with 3 to 5 complementary skills. Like it's you can I've seen agents work with like 80, 100 skills. Like sometimes it's kind of mind-boggling how does it still work, but it does. But for best practice is like 3 to 5 because the agent will have like a much better intuition and idea of like when to call each individual one. And skills can be reused. Say I give it like a perplexity action. It might search using perplexity and then realize, oh, like I found more information about San Francisco. Like let me figure out like what are the best restaurants, and then I'm like, oh, these cuisines are interesting. Let me go figure out like let me learn more about this type of food. So it's like it can almost like chain skills and reuse them to be even more powerful as well. And yeah, so for example, it might search, like crawl the web, search again, and like just keep going back and forth until you have like a really magical outcome. So we have this, we have this secret weapon. We have the AI agents like tunneling towards these objectives and doing all these things on its own. How does it know when to stop? Like you got to tell it when to stop. It's that simple. And it's just like condition step. You can just in natural language define, hey, here's when you're allowed to stop. And to whenever how you want to define it to stop, you want to make it like specific and measurable, kind of thinking back to our prompting guidelines, like they all apply here. And like so for example here, like two quick examples is, say you're enriching a company and you give it all these like scraping and web tools, you can say specifically, hey, like your job is done when you found these like 6 companies with these specific 3 points of data. Or I like to sometimes give it an out. So it's like, hey, stop after company info found, or you've like performed 10 searches, because I don't want it to necessarily run 100,000, run 100 searches if the information isn't there, just because it consumes credits. And like best practice is like, multiple conditions and like a timeout kind of fail safe. So kind of like those examples you have right now is like you can have like multiple conditions of like exit conditions for different things, and make sure one of them is kind of that fail safe option, like hey, or you've already done this like 10 times, or hey, or you've already done this like 15 times. Okay, whenever you're prompting your agents, so I think this can be a little bit intimidating, but I promise you it's not that hard. We're gonna give you a quick 3 easy framework kind of how to approach it, and all the same specific prompting tips we talked about before apply here. Here's just some more specifically for the AI agent step. And there's 3 main sections you want to include in this prompt. First, the objective. And so for the objective, you want to give it the goal and its purpose. So say you have like this enrichment agent. I'm gonna want to say, hey, your goal is to enrich and like find these people LinkedIn, get all these information. Like your goal is to find as much possible information about the contact received. Like that could be an example objective. 2 is tools. We need to tell it what's in its tool belt and what it can use and when. And so, say you have this kind of enrichment agent, maybe it has like a LinkedIn scraper, maybe it has like Perplexity. You can say, hey, like use Perplexity to go search the internet, find their LinkedIn URL, use it to find company news and information, use a LinkedIn scraper once you have a LinkedIn URL to pull information about the person. So like be specific about what's in the tool belt and when to use it. You could think of like if you had a smart intern join your team, you might have like 100 apps. Like your team might use like maybe 100 is exaggeration. You might have like 10 apps that your company uses all the time. Like how are they supposed to know what these apps are and like when to use them, like with little context or no onboarding. So just give it a little bit of direction of when to use these tools. And exit conditions, like we just talked about in the last kind of step or section, is these are like when we tell the agent to stop. And not only do you want to like define the exit conditions like in the actual condition block or the condition step, but you also want to define in the prompt like, hey, your task is done when you've done XYZ. And having this both in kind of like the exit kind of like step as well as in the prompt will make it a lot more reliable and make sure it's hitting its exit conditions. And then another kind of best practice here is like agents can go back and forth. You could talk with an agent in the chat and it go back and forth and go do things for you. But often if you have like an agent within a workflow and you want the agent to be fully autonomous, you want to remind the agent that it's like, hey, you are autonomous. You don't talk to me. You don't come back for any reason. Like you are working on this until it's completely done. And so you can kind of use some prompting tricks to just remind the agent, like, hey, do not stop until this is done for any reason, to make sure it's going to continue and complete the task instead of trying to. Sometimes it tries to be a little bit helpful and ask you for help. And so with that, now we're going to build the lead enrichment agent, and we're going to I know we kind of flew through the agent step right there, but right now we're really going to break it down and have an agent step on our flow editor, really break down all those concepts, and it's going to be a ton of fun.